House supports Narendra Modi as India's Prime Minister after the next general elections? Okay, great. Since I don't, who's keeping time? Sorry. Minute count. Since I don't have any rebuttals to cover, I will speak slowly for the benefit of the House. First, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to an India where we have a ruling party and the office of a Prime Minister which has been completely debilitated by corruption, by agents acting against the interests of the state, of the original ideas with which a state was originally conceived to be, and the ruling political party has essentially made a joke of our democratic system. And in these times, we tell you that there's a tipping point that we are not taking advantage of, and I'll talk to you about what the tipping point is. But more essentially, let's first understand what the kind of blatant corruption that the current UPA government has indulged in, with scams ranging from A. Raja in the 2G scam, or whether it be the CWG scam, or like Gupta says, in the 2G scam, in the CWG scam, they went and sold materials above the market price. In the 2G scam, they went and sold the spectrum below the market price. In the Reliance scam, they went and asked them, what is the market price? Right? So there is a problem of this government that we have clearly left unaddressed, and the people have lost complete faith in the government. In fact, corruption is seen as a necessary evil for the functioning of any government, because they're like, as long as we are getting something from the government, it's okay if they take a part of it. And this kind of complacency is completely unpardonable, ladies and gentlemen, because on the other end of the spectrum, you have the people who are the citizens of the United States, for instance, who are so proud of their leaders because they're led by charismatic leaders like Barack Obama, and that's the difference really between George Bush and him, because these people really are like, my president is Barack Obama, there are no red states or blue states, there's just the United States of America, and we need that kind of patriotism to be infused into our society. And there's not just a psychological feeling of oneness in the diversity that our nation already has. There's a reason we are asking you to consider this proposition seriously, because currently we think we're at the tipping point of development in India. And what is that tipping point? We think that, like the development happened in the 1960s in Japan, or in Saudi Arabia when oil exports started, we have an entire generations of IITians like Sonadeep Sen and Sirius waiting to, and they've all graduated. They're in their prime, ladies and gentlemen. This is the point where we have an educated Indian middle class waiting to take that next leap and further propel India into development. In a second, propel India into state of development. And I think that generation needs to be taken seriously, and we need to give them an opportunity. The current governmental setup is not allowing for it because of the rampant corruption and inefficiencies that are being infused into the system, giving people a chance who don't actually deserve it. Yes.
Your arguments so far are arguments in favor of leaders like Kejriwal or Sushma Swaraj. Why Modi in particular?
Okay, because unfortunately or fortunately for us, we are living in a democracy. So we think it's completely unacceptable to give somebody a voice who shows up at Jantar Mantar and has whatever the number of followers he does have, because we have placed our faith in while we are not discounting the kind of public support Kejriwal has, what we're necessarily saying is we have placed our trust in a system of elections and a system of democratically electing your leaders, and we think that's important. Now, of course, Kejriwal is going to be democratically elected, or there are going to be elections, but there's absolutely no evidence other than the fact that he has an anti-corruption drive. There's absolutely no evidence that he's administratively capable of engaging in these kind of activities. And Gujarat, on the other hand, is a case in point of the kind of industrialization all of India could be currently experiencing, and with that kind of track record, and not a single allegation of corruption against a leader who's led them for so long, we think it's important to place our faith in and trust in somebody who has a given track record, because we think he's going to come to the center and reinvent the cabinet, because it's important to do this, because currently the office of the Prime Minister is severely undermined, ladies and gentlemen, because he's seen as an unmotivated, unwielding and puppet Prime Minister in the hands of somebody who's completely not even part of the democratic setup, right? And we think that is the problem that we are currently facing, and we need that person wielding the stick who's ready to make decisions, because that has allowed people in Gujarat to take benefit of this kind of development that all of India could see, because only that generation in Gujarat is getting the benefit. We see no reason why the rest of India should not be reaping those benefits. Having said that, Let's talk about sit down. Let's talk about how Narendra Modi is a charismatic leader who's capable of doing this, because he has a loyal set of tried and tested cabinet ministers and a team in Gujarat, which we think he's going to bring to the center and completely reinvent the cabinet, forcing the Congress also to reinvent itself, because there's been this real policy inertia of the Congress, because they've been in power so long. The Congress has not really reinvented itself or changed or come off this really centrist view of politics, because they don't take a stance on anything that's really sensitive or that might be controversial, so to speak, because they don't feel the need to. We think that a stand must be taken. And of course, you might hear arguments about how he has a track record of the Godhra riots and everything, but that's non-unique, ladies and gentlemen, because you look at the Congress and a track record, 1984 and the Sikh riots, the Congress had active knowledge of the Sikhs being beaten up in Delhi, and the police was a part of this machinery. And so we think, and in any case, he's never been convicted in a court of law. In fact, we think that these allegations will actually serve him in good stead in the Prime Minister's office, primarily because, and hear me out, primarily because he's going to be put in spotlight more than any other Prime Minister would otherwise be put, like Arvind Kejriwal, because you're going to trust Arvind Kejriwal for all the action in the anti-corruption campaign he's done, and the minute you hear an allegation of corruption, you're going to be like, come on, that's not true, right? Because he has a track record of this. But here, since he's beginning with a not so great public image, he's going to be in spotlight, and you have enough checks and balances in the democratic society to ensure that no large-scale violence like this is perpetrated or any kind of large-scale discrimination. Because we think, ladies and gentlemen, we need somebody who's ready to make decisions right now, and we are going to lose this opportune moment of taking control of our population that is finally going to be able to propel India into that next stage of development, where we start to see, after this sudden rapid growth, a consistent growth for the next 20 or 30 years. And the time to do that is now. It's time to reshuffle the cabinet. It's time to force the Congress party to reinvent itself and show that they actually have to work hard to win an election, and not just put Rahul Gandhi, who passed some roadies interview, and right? And with that, we're very proud to propose.
I told you to do it before the debate and you did.
Is this good? Yeah. Mr. Speaker, we understand that the people of the nation can often be dissatisfied with the slow pace of change, right? But we tell you that this slow pace of change is for a variety of reasons. It's because you need to account for all of the various interests that need to be balanced when something is done. It's not just about corruption, it's also about political dissent. It's also about balancing competing interests, ladies and gentlemen. And we tell you, Modi is not a leader who respects any of these things. Ladies and gentlemen, we have primarily three grounds to tell you why Narendra Modi shouldn't be the next Prime Minister. The first is that you're in need of a clean image when you're holding high public office. The second is a consequential analysis which stems from the kind of exclusionary politics that Narendra Modi is known to practice. And thirdly are the harms associated with having an extremely egotistical person holding high public office and what that really means in terms of risk. But first, a few points of refutation. You told us that the problem is corruption, right? So we don't entirely agree with that. But even if it was, we tell you that this is a justification to have a leader who will not be corrupt, right? Because a large chunk of the argumentation from opening was just arguments to tell you why the Congress should lose, right? It doesn't matter who the Congress loses to, whether it's Modi or Sushma Swaraj or Arun Jaitley, because the Congress will have to reinvent itself irrespective, and they understand that they don't need this roadies wala Rahul Gandhi, right? So we don't see how that's uniquely applicable to Narendra Modi and therefore irrelevant to that extent, right? They tell us that Obama is this example of this paragon of charisma, right? So we tell you, yeah, he has charisma, right? But he hasn't delivered on a lot of promises, right? He hasn't done as much as was expected on Guantanamo Bay, despite being into his second term. And he hasn't done much with respect to gun control either, right? We tell you, charisma shouldn't be an objective standard, because people possessed with charisma don't intrinsically make good leaders. why we need a person with a clean image. Right? So we understand that this affects it largely on an international level, right? When people look at your country, they look at the kind of leader that your people have chosen and they pass certain value judgments. We understand that this is precisely why people really care about sex scandals, right? They care about the image of an individual, they care about whether they're corrupt, they care about how rich they are, they care about, a variety of things, right? So really the clean image is particularly important as to how India is perceived internationally, right? I mean, really that we understand this even at a national level, right? So for instance, we have Sajjan Kumar, who wasn't really convicted in 1984, which I'm sure Jagat remembers really well, right? So we understand that despite all of this, right? Despite being an MP from Outer Delhi, one of the largest constituencies, this man has never been made a minister. And the very rationale behind that was that he's far too controversial. It doesn't matter whether or not he's been convicted. People generally shy away from having a controversial candidate, right? Hillary Clinton, when she was campaigning for her own election, she tried to kill Bill on the sidelines because of the allegations of cheating, right? And when you've seen people like, for instance, Berlusconi, who's come to power and has abused that power in order to, have him, get laid quite a lot, right? Fairly large amount, right? So we see that places this attachment of value judgments with particular leaders, right? And we think that that's a real problem, right? Because you want to have value not attached not to the person, but really to what they do, right? It's not about how charismatic Obama should be, right? It should be more about what Obama actually delivers on. And we tell you, when you let the values that will be associated with these people take the forefront, that is actually going to take attention. That is certainly going to put the spotlight on Modi, but it's going to put the spotlight on his face as opposed to his ass, where I'm going to tell you what happens. Right? This is the kind of politics that has been right. Let's look at the kind of politics that Narendra Modi has practiced, right? And why he's so efficient in Gujarat. Yes, Gujarat has a lot of great electricity, right? But where did this electricity come from, right? It came from the land that was the tribal land that was occupied, where you built dams and you shut people up without actually having any sort of due process of law, right? You understand that, of course, Modi is really fast, but when you don't take into account conflicting interests of people like the minorities, which ideally ought to be protected, of course you're going to be able to do things really fast. Let me tell you that could have happened in a different manner. It could have happened at a slower pace. Gujarat could have gotten brilliant electricity 5 years later when you made alternate arrangements. You didn't have to steal tribal land. Right? I mean, that's precisely the kind of politics that Narendra Modi practices. He doesn't appease the 2% Gujarat Muslim minority in Gujarat. All he cares about is staying in power and keeping that power and doing things for everybody else. That's all he really cares about, right? We tell you that this is really problematic, right? Given the fact that he hasn't given a single Gujarati Muslim a ticket in the last elections that occurred in Gujarat, right? So, before I go on to the point of his character and why having an egotistical leader is generally bad and has historically been bad, I take the point of Rahul.
Sir, please tell us where Narendra Modi has been convicted that you're so sure that he's done these things on the basis of which you're embracing the entire...
He hasn't been convicted. And we understand that he hasn't been convicted. There's a variety of reasons why he hasn't been convicted. But we can't really pass aspersions on that, right? The most I can actually tell you is that this is someone who people think might have done it, and tell you that association in and of itself is bad enough, right? So let's look at the last idea, right? Which is the character of this man, Narendra Modi, the great Gujarati with the lion's mane, right? We tell you that when there were riots happening in Gujarat, right? We may not have been able to convict him in a lot of things, right? But we have seen on part of Narendra Modi with respect to what he did with the dams and the land acquisition process that was preferred, right? We see that this is an individual who only cares about getting the ends. He doesn't care about what the means are. And I think that is particularly problematic in a democracy like India, right? Because this is a man who has shown that he is willing to subvert the system, he's willing to subvert the police, he's willing to subvert the judiciary and all of the land acquisition tribunals in order to get to the ends that he wants. And tell you that is really problematic, right? Because we tell you democracy is more about the process. We prefer a slower pace if it actually accounts for all interests and doesn't have this sort of exclusionary effect that is characteristic of Modi, right? Narendra Modi is going to reinvent the cabinet. Obviously, he's going to reinvent the cabinet into an actual wooden cabinet, which he opens and there's a little placard inside that says, yes, ladies and gentlemen, Narendra Modi is not like any of the other party leaders. Let's understand that, right? You have Sonia Gandhi, Manish Tiwari, Ahmed Patel, and V. George all working in concert, preventing one person from having an isolated power and an isolated dominion that people like Indira Gandhi have had in the past and abused in the past when they themselves subverted the system, like Narendra Modi is likely to do, right? Because even within the BJP, right, he has his own unique cabinet in Gujarat. There are a bunch of yes men that let him do whatever the hell he wants, right? You don't have him talking to Sushma Swaraj, Arun Jaitley, Rajnath Singh, and Gadkari, right? Let me tell you that is a problem because this man cares only and only about what he thinks. We tell you that that is not the kind of person we want to have leading this nation. With that, I beg to oppose.
I thank the yellow for his speech and now invite Deputy Prime Minister.
Where is he going? He just went there before that wait.
Small one, nervous.
Mr. Speaker, the reason, Ambar's speech was largely irrelevant in his speech, and please listen to what I'm going to say, is that Ambar has not told you any one single flaw of Modi that is unique to Modi. And we'll tell you why this is so, right? He has only told you flaws that exist with the extant Congress government as well. Can anyone say anything against Sonia Gandhi? Has anyone persecuted them for what happened in 1984? No, right? So we're saying, and we're saying that the reason that this is so is because Sonia Gandhi is not controversial in that sense and there is not that much glare on her for that reason. We're saying that the reason that Sonia Gandhi has been able to get away with this sycophant cabinet that's been piling up to her for 8 years now, that has led to the complete debilitation, not just of the image of our country, but in the real developmental agenda that our country should be pursuing, like Giri told you. But I'm going to begin by telling you the real value of the checks and balances that will necessarily exist with Modi, right? Why is this so? When you have a controversial leader like him, when you already have this antecedent of, oh, he may be communal, oh, he may be egotistical, oh, maybe whatever, right? The thing is that this glare on him will be so much that he will not have, it's not like Manmohan Singh can shoot someone in the head in like broad daylight and nothing will happen to him, right? The Prime Minister is not some untouchable institution, right? The checks and balances of the judiciary, the checks and balances of the fourth estate in the form of the press, and generally the public revolt, right, will exist and will be so much more amplified with Modi for all the reasons that they're telling you about. And we see that as a hugely important thing because we don't view Modi as the sole importance, and I'm going to say this 50 times in my speech, the sole importance of Modi, the unique thing with Modi, what distinguishes Modi from everybody else is that he has been shown to pursue and achieve the developmental agenda better than anyone else. Burden on them is to come and tell us why. In this crucial inflection point of India, where the mass of the educated population of the youth are prepared to mobilize and rapidly develop. And Biri clearly told you that if we don't do this, we're going to have the lost decades like we had in Japan in the 1990s when we had stagflation, when people are not going to go out and work, people are not going to feel patriotic. And you see this is hugely problematic because India is in that crucial inflection point now. If everybody sitting in this room doesn't care about India, is not patriotic about India, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to lose this generation, which is a generation that is a transition between between a developing India as a developing country to a developed country, right? And we're telling you that Modi is uniquely suited to cater not only to the entire population of India, but to the world as well, with his almost, with his really aggressive developmental agenda, right? Because we see him as being obsessed with the idea of development. We think he's the one person who's got it figured out amongst all the other Indian states, and he's done it consistently, right? We're also telling you that he does not have the image of corruption. There has not been a single, there's not even been an allegation of corruption against him. He's the most squeaky clean person there is, right? And we're telling, and so the whole characterization on opening is that the reason India today is facing all of its problems is because of this inertia and sort of, like general detachment that the Indian populace sees with rampant corruption, right? And that is hugely problematic. We think someone who doesn't listen to anyone else, someone who will go down hard on things like corruption, someone who will take these almost quasi-dictatorial decisions is the person we need in place now for this crucial inflection point, right? Because it is these hard decisions that will propel India into the future. Yes, Amber.
Alright, Nitish Kumar has a pretty good record as well, and he's less controversial than Modi. Why not Nitish?
Right. So now, if this debate is going to go into a listing of like 400 leaders and the merits and demerits of each of them, it's not going to really work, right? If that was the case, you should have come and said Nitish first and talked about his benefits and not benefits. This debate is going to be about whether Modi or not. That's it. Now, Amber had this whole part in his speech where he said Obama really hasn't delivered or anything, but yes, he is charismatic. We're telling you that this charisma, this dynamism is something that Modi also shares. However, now this is an even if argument, right? So let's, for the first leg of the argument, assume that Obama didn't achieve anything. But the patriotism that flows, the motivation that the American people derive from that charisma in their leader is phenomenal, right? Because the American people want to work for America. The American people want to move ahead because they believe in what the leader is telling them, right? And we see this is hugely important because if Manmohan Singh comes and tells me, you should not go abroad and go, you should work in India, I don't want to believe it. But if a dynamic leader who seems decisive with a proven track record tells me that do this for India, I will show you results, like, work hard for your country, that's the huge benefit, right? And secondly, Obama has achieved so much in addition to his charisma, like the manner in which Guantanamo Bay was shut down, the manner in which he dealt with Sandy are hugely important benefits for a charismatic, dynamic leader, right? We think that someone like Manmohan Singh would have to get into a wheelchair and be like, you wouldn't even be able to get into the plane to go to like Sandy affected areas, right? And there'd be like this Z security like flying around, like scared that like a raindrop would kill him. So, sit down. Mr. Speaker, what's most important is Amber's almost, and this is the, Amber's whole speech is evidence of how unpatriotic we've become. He wants us to choose our Prime Minister on an international image. India is a sovereign democratic country and we will choose who we want to lead our country for the next 50 years, Mr. Speaker. And we will not be coerced by what America tells us or anyone else tells us, right? Especially Symbiosis Law School. Mr. Speaker. Right, now, so to quickly tell you what the biggest problem I have with the status quo, it is this rampant corruption. It is the fact that the populace, everyone sitting in this room, has such deep-seated disenchantment with our leadership, right? We're telling you that this controversial person who will come in with all these checks and balances will change that. It will motivate this crucial, critical mass to really, whatever nuclear fission thingy, to become a reaction, get the critical mass thing, right? So, and we're also telling you that there's nothing about Modi that they've told you, that the harms of Modi have told you, that don't exist with someone like the Congress, right? And for all those reasons, we're very, very, very proud to
I thank the given for his speech and now invite the deputy leader of opposition.
Mr. Speaker, when Deep comes here and tells us that we are a democracy, and we can choose whoever we want, Mr. Speaker, then we say our answer to that is have elections. The reason we are having this debate is to discuss whether Narendra Modi deserves our support or not, ladies and gentlemen, and that is what this debate is going to be about, whether Narendra Modi deserves our support. Mr. Speaker, there are a host of rebuttals before I enter. Deep comes here and says 1982 happened, no convictions have happened so far. What about it? Those people still exist. Mr. Speaker, we tell you that regardless of which political party is there in power, they will protect their own people. But Amber spoke to you about the stigma that is attached with these people once and for all, and the effect of that stigma on how these people are perceived in public life later, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, Sajjan Kumar, apart from the inappropriate remark that Amber made with regard to Jagat, he has been an MP since 1984 till 2009, and this is one of the largest constituencies. He's from Delhi too. If you can make Ajay Makan a minister, why can't you make Sajjan Kumar a minister? But Mr. Speaker, the logic being that once and for all, that stigma has been attached. No court of law has convicted him still. You do not want to put him in the limelight because that limelight will bounce off onto the party itself, and that will not work out well for the larger interest of the party also, Mr. Speaker. Now, Mr. Speaker, he comes and tells us that there are multiple checks and balances in a democracy. There is the all-power, not taken on Akshay, there is the all-powerful fourth estate, and all that can keep Narendra Modi in check, Mr. Speaker. But Mr. Speaker, anyone who's been reading the newspapers, they will see that only one criticism of Narendra Modi, which actually does come out, is that he exercises an iron grip over his state and exercises a good control over the media. So when Deep comes in and tells us there has not been a single, I have not taken Akshay, there has been not a single allegation of corruption against Narendra Modi, I put to you a hypothetical situation. What is more likely that a person who has been in power now for 10 years and for 5 more, he has never been accused of corruption, no enemy of his has ever thought of accusing him, or whether he has been successful in suppressing all such allegations, Mr. Speaker. Not taken, Mr. Speaker, then I bring to you the idea about when Palepu says quasi-dictatorial, that India needs people who can put their foot down, who are even quasi-dictatorial and can get things done, Mr. Speaker. But Mr. Speaker, we tell you that there is a problem with that because Narendra Modi then will be able to do two things, Mr. Speaker. Either he will be successful in breaking the rules where he can, Mr. Speaker. So depending on how his cabinet pans out and how much the media is giving limelight to him, or whether or not around the same time a gang rape has taken place in Delhi and what the press deems to be important, Narendra Modi can get by breaking the rules, Mr. Speaker. But then let's look at the other alternative. Yes, in some cases, he may not be able to always get his way. He may not be able to break the rule. But Mr. Speaker, he will still push the envelope to the damn best that he can. Because this is a person who has shown that he is absolutely okay with subverting this non-taken action. I will take you in a bit. He will subvert the system as far as he can, Mr. Speaker. And that, Mr. Speaker, we submit is a problem. Akshay.
Sir, don't you think when he comes from Gujarat to the centre, he'll enjoy a lot less discretion because the centre has so many checks and balances?
Thank you, sir. Mr. Speaker, he came and based his entire case on the fact that Narendra Modi puts his foot down and is able to do things. Now then he tells us that Narendra Modi's discretion will be severely curtailed. His actions, Mr. Speaker, are also going to be curtailed in that context. If he can then tell us that in that curtailed context and environment, Narendra Modi can still move this generation of India into development and growth, Mr. Speaker, then that is what something that the closing now has to provide this house. That is something that did not come out from either Akshay or Palepu's speech. If Narendra Modi is so severely checked, then how does the Iron Man getting work done image work out at the national level, Mr. Speaker? Mr. Speaker, now let's come to the point that Amber was making about exclusionary politics that Narendra Modi uses. Mr. Speaker, Gujarat is a state with a very small minority of Muslim people, at least after the alleged genocide that took place. We don't know if he did it, we don't know if he didn't. I will not comment on that, that's for you to decide. But Mr. Speaker, let's look at it. This is a man who had 3 MPs from the Muslim community in the last general elections. 3 MLAs, sorry. He dropped all of them this time because he did not take it, sir, because he realizes the Muslim vote is not significant in Gujarat. He can get by without it, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, this is an exclusion of a community against, obviously against its own interest. Mr. Speaker, we submit to you that Narendra Modi believes in what is right and wrong in his mind. He does not believe in the larger rights framework, Mr. Speaker. He is not okay with the idea of having a large press which has absolute freedom to comment about him. He is not okay with the idea of checks and balances in his cabinet, equally powerful people, ideologues who can subvert his vision. Mr. Speaker, we submit that that is a problem essentially that this house cannot be okay with. India, regardless of what we are doing and at what pace we are progressing, will value a leader that is okay with the grand norm, with the constitution, which is there has to be democracy in all forms, Mr. Speaker. Even paralysis is a function of democracy, Mr. Speaker, because it can only happen when there are multiple voices cutting each other out. Mr. Speaker, now let me come to the idea of how this pans out. And Mr. Speaker, Palipu gave a very myopic view. We do not have to care about what the world thinks. We can make whoever we want our Prime Minister. I think it is absolutely relevant what the world thinks about who our leader is, Mr. Speaker. Let's look at it in terms of international relations, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, India is at a very precarious point, and this is something that they said. We are on the verge of becoming a developed nation from a developing nation. Let's look at it. Who our neighbors are. We have a neighbor who's also apparently our number one enemy, and which is an Islamic State. Mr. Speaker, Narendra Modi's views on this is, well, even though he doesn't say annihilate them, he's definitely not okay with their existence, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, how does that pan out in bilateral talks, Mr. Speaker? We submit to you that is a problem. Let's take it even farther, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, what about the relations that we have with frontline Middle Eastern and African states with a predominantly Islamic population, Mr. Speaker? Mr. Speaker, we submit that these relations will not break down. We are not being stupid. These relations will probably still continue. But there will definitely be a fragmentation, a break in ties, depending on who the leader is, Mr. Speaker. If that was not true, Mr. Speaker, there would be absolutely no difference in terms of change in government, because when Democrats are in power, India is not all that good. When Bush comes to power, India does extremely well because India gets along with a particular type of government in the United States. Similarly, Mr. Speaker, people in other countries get along with a particular type of government leader in India as well, and that, Mr. Speaker, we submit to you matters. Mr. Speaker, now why this side of the House's stance would stand. Mr. Speaker, what they've come and told us, Narendra Modi, he has the popular mandate, he's been elected thrice now, he should be gotten to the national level because he can get things done. But Mr. Speaker, with all the harms, and we allege them, they accepted, that there have been allegations, he hasn't been convicted. Mr. Speaker, we bring to you an alternative, and this is not a debate about alternatives, we are not saying choose Nitish or choose Sheila Dixit, again people who been elected thrice. We are telling you that viable alternatives of people who can get work done exist even in this time. Why bring a guy who has problems to the national level, Mr. Speaker, when those problems cannot be resolved beyond a reasonable doubt? With that, we rest.
I thank the Deputy Leader of Opposition for his speech, and now invite the Member of Government.
From closing government, we're going to base our case on two fundamental premises. The first one is that as a person and a politician in and of himself, we think that right now, Narendra Modi is the best candidate we have. I'm going to talk about his image and the kind of development he brought to Gujarat. The problem is this. Right now, India is erring on the side of tribals. Right now, India is not developing fast enough. We think that Modi brings the pace required. I'll tell you how. But more than that, right, we're going to tell you what do people care about the most. I'm going to prove to you that people care more about economic development and money that they earn over all the other things that they spoke about, and why Modi, of all the other choices that we have, is the best choice in the scenario right now. Why do people care the most about money and economic development? Right? Quite obviously because it is the best way to meet that. It's the best way to meet the immediate need. People have the direct short-term need of food, of having a house, of being able to give your family a respectable and comfortable life. More than all of their other freedoms and all of these things, people care the most about it because it's the most enabling. If I have money, I can do a lot of things in my life directly. I feel in power. I feel like I have control to take care of my family, to take care of people who are important to me. The best example of this was the Arab Spring, which was motivated by economic downturn. For over 30 to 40 years, regimes like Tunisia and Egypt had the same policy that they have right now. Because of the global downturn, when these governments fail to adapt and fail to give jobs to these people, that's why when a person in Tunisia set himself on fire because he was unemployed, not because he was dissatisfied with the government, because he didn't have money, that's when he got angry. And that's the most basic thing you need to understand. It's it. People care the most about money, and Modi can give them the development that gives you that the best. That's why he is the person we should choose. So now let's talk about Narendra Modi in and of himself, right? First of all, let's look at the development he's brought to Gujarat in a little more detail, because we think opening Gov was a little flippant about this. First of all, we think the highest amount of direct FDI in India is in the state of Gujarat. First of all, this shows clearly that he is able to maintain relations with the world abroad, because different countries don't respond to how nice you are, what if you have a main or if you don't. They respond to a financial incentive. If you can show them that their money is going to bring back money, they're going to give you their money in terms of an investment. Modi has been able to show that to the most number of people, and that is why Gujarat has the highest FDI right now. Nextly, we think Modi has been really tough to opposition that he faced within Gujarat as well. For example, we don't think a lot of chief ministers would have the guts to break down Hindu temples only because you need to make bigger roads. Only because those temples were illegally built, we say Modi went ahead and broke down many Hindu temples because he wanted wider roads for the people of Gujarat. We think the Muslims in Gujarat are the safest and the richest among those in India, and that's something that's widely known, right? There have been no cases of atrocities against the Muslims in Gujarat in the recent times. I'll talk about the historical thing later. But what am I getting to with this, right? Right now, and he gave me the example of the dam that was built, and it's a little ironic. He said that Modi just trampled over everyone, because we think this was a long process that was drawn out. Where you had people like Amir Khan, Medha Patkar, everyone coming in and stalling the process for as long as they could. If you allow people like Manmohan Singh who don't have the guts to stand up to these people or haven't been standing up to these people so far, we say you're going to keep erring on the side of these tribals. Let's look at examples in India. The nuclear plant in Maharashtra isn't getting a go-ahead because the government doesn't have the guts to stand up to all of these social activists. The mining in Orissa is not happening because the government, it isn't that they're negotiating, it's that they just don't want to do anything that's not politically expedient. Modi is the person who has the guts to do what's required and not what is most beneficial for him, right? Sit, not yet. Alright, so we think that what Modi is doing, we completely concede that there are things like coalition politics and there will be dissent, but Modi is the one who shifts the momentum in favor of development. So he might not be able to have that small little cupboard that Amber spoke about with yes written in it, but he's going to tell people that no, this policy is beneficial, and unless you show me some concrete harms against it, I'm not going to listen to you. He's not going to listen to nonsense that this is my land for the last 500 years, and that's why even if you give me the same piece of land next door, I'm not going to take it. Right? We think that's the kind of man we need. Sit, not yet. Now let's deal with the only other point they had, right? That his image is really bad and all of that. Why is it important that Modi has never been convicted? I'll deal with the perception point. I know it's a valid one. The point is this. The government controls the CBI, right? That's what everyone agrees to. The Congress has been in power for, I think, over 2 consecutive terms, and they have a CBI commission sitting on the Modi issue. They still have not been able to find anything to give any proof against him in the Gujarat High Court. We think that says something about him, that even a Congress control who desperately want to do something against Modi because he's so good, we think that's a problem. Next, we think that people are inspired by Gujarat's success story, not necessarily by the stuff they spoke about, because we think the image that they're talking about has largely been generated by the media and these opposition parties who want to try and discredit Modi. We think what opening Gowsat stands here, say that people will judge Modi for what he does as Prime Minister and not on this. If he's not good, they'll throw him out, right? Now let's talk about Modi versus the other show.
Alright, are you actually telling me that social activists like Medha Patkar and Teesta Setalvad are complete retards and don't have any legitimate perspective?
The point is this, they both have perspective. The issue is what do you do when you're talking, right? Do you have the guts to say that only if I see valid reason in what you're saying, I'll do what you're saying. Otherwise, I won't. And from the examples, right, they need to show us a precedent of in which case have these tribals been overruled. I gave you examples where they haven't. Let's look at him versus all the others, right? We think right now the perception of the Congress government is that of one which is highly this elite and disconnected from the people. Where Sonia Gandhi, Rahul Gandhi don't make any public appearances and they don't issue any press releases. If you have any other candidate from the Congress, he may or may not be controlled by Sonia Gandhi, but he will be perceived as though he is someone who is being controlled by Sonia Gandhi. That's a problem, because then people will feel that again this person has no power of his own. He's some kind of a puppet. That causes loss of faith in democracy. People feel disconnected from the system. They don't vote. They don't care. They become skeptical and throw up their hands. Why not Nitish Kumar and Mamata Banerjee? First of all, tell us why they should be, and second of all, their agendas are largely region specific, but development is not region specific, right? It's a nationwide policy outlook. So why does closing government deserve to take this final, and why should this trophy stay in Bombay and not go outside? Because we told you that Modi is a person who has enough merit in and of himself to be PM. We told you why he's the best candidate among the options we have. We're so proud to propose.
I thank the member of government for his speech. I now invite the member of opposition. Go ahead.
Mr. Speaker, you cannot deny the awesomeness of Narendra Modi when it comes to development and infrastructure in Gujarat. At the same time, you cannot deny his poor track record when it comes to a minority bias, which I mean, in the long run always holds against him, right? So what I'm going to do in my extension speech is basically tell you why the need of the PM changes according to various governments, according to various times, and why right now India doesn't have a need for Narendra Modi, right? Because in all these speeches which have come about till now, we have not been able to identify India and India's people as a stakeholder, where we're merely concentrating on Narendra Modi being the stakeholder out here, completely ignoring the Indian aspect of it, whether it's internal or external now. So when they brought about this great concept of Obama, right, 10 to 15 years ago, there is no way in hell Obama would have ever been elected in the US, and it's only now because of his economic clout, as they put it, or because he's economically superior to a Romney or to whoever else, right, that Americans in this hope have elected Obama, right? So it varies according to the needs and the times as to when and how a leader can be elected, right? Now, what are we saying here? India's need is not just a mere infrastructural or, an economic development. It's also to develop humanity and a cultural aspect of it, which we've not been able to touch upon, right? Why is this so important in the Indian aspect? Because India doesn't identify itself or does not portray an image to the world as being merely economically or infrastructurally forward, but also culturally and humanitarianly forward, right? Which is why we go around harping about this aspect of our Vedas and our culture and our various traditions we have, because India believes in a wholesome approach to what a developed nation should be, Mr. Speaker, sir. And when you have a danger of, as the side put it, a quasi-dictatorial Hindutva figure as a leader, right, the image which you're giving out to the world is that yes, India does believe in economic and infrastructural development, but at the cost of minorities, but at the cost of challenging the very rights which people expect from a responsible leader, right? And the simplest example I can give you is Winston Churchill was Britain's most favored prime minister, but still lost a subsequent election after the war because people simply didn't find the need for a wartime leader in times of peace, right? Which is also what the Dark Knight Rises talks about, right? When they talk about God, right? So the need to develop is not just economic, but also culturally and humanitarian, right? And there is no way India can ever be compared to a China, which is what we're talking about here, right? Okay, suspicion is always viewed upon a communist nation like China because it does achieve development at the cost of its people. It does achieve economic and infrastructural development at the cost of its people's basic human rights being violated, right? And that's not an image which India wants to portray to the world, Mr. Speaker, sir. And if we want to develop and generate and change this corrupt system, which is the need which this side of the government took upon, right? You cannot change this corrupt so-called system when you have a leader like Narendra Modi who portrays to the world that I don't give a flying whatever about human rights, right? Now, what did the proposition come about here and say? They said the need which they took upon was that the current system needs to be overhauled as it's weak and corrupt, right? Now, this side of the house raised a very pertinent question. If your primary need is to remove this image of weakness and corruption, why not have people like Arvind or whoever XYZ to change this system of government? What I'm saying is this: isn't targeting of minorities, isn't gross human rights violation also an aspect of a weak and corrupt system? When you have a leader who allows these kind of activities to occur, doesn't it also indicate to the world that you have a weak system which is unable to rein or curb these anti-national or these anti-human elements within your system? If you ask me, that's a much more crucial I would say, indicator of failure of state machinery as compared to just mere corruption or as, let's say, taking bribes here and there. Go.
Okay,
so no one is disputing the fact. So no one is disputing the fact that you should not oppress minorities or you should be a nice person, right? Tell us how Modi will do this or why he will be perceived as doing this, especially when I told you when people are agreeing.
So this need which they're talking about, I'll just condense it out to you. Right? What they're saying is that you need to display the spotless image to the world of how India has cleaned up its act and has gotten better from the quagmire it's currently stuck in, right? But what this side of the house came and told you was that that's not Narendra Modi's track record. If you're talking about giving a greater spotlight to Narendra Modi, and when he steps up onto the national stage, right, you're going to have a greater spotlight cast upon him. You're also going to have greater aspersions cast upon the negative aspects of what he's done, which is completely going to override all the possible benefits which he may derive if he becomes a prime minister, right? Because people always tend to focus on the more negative aspects rather than the positive aspects, which is why I believe somebody like Manmohan is an ideal prime minister, because at least he has an impeccable track record. And if he's taking time to get India to a particular stage, I think that's okay, because at least he's getting it done without compromising on innate values such as human life and human dignity, which is what that side of the house came about here. Closing government said the need is, human basic need is economic development, and that's the primary need of people. No, if primary need of a person is to survive, right? You can only talk about making money tomorrow when I know that my life and my house won't be taken away by a majority government or by a majority Hindutva party in order right now. Only then can I then subsequently worry about making enough money, right? And it's not just about that. Let's put that argument aside. Let's take up another aspect. Merely because there are people richer than me does not generate a feeling of ill will. An unfair advantage given to him, right, where he develops unfairly, is what really pisses me off. Because if somebody is richer than I am, I would be inspired to work as hard as he is to, get to that stage. But if somebody gets more money or gets it through corruption or whatever, that's when I have an issue. And that's not necessarily going to happen in the Narendra Modi case, right? Because all politics at some level, and you know this for a fact, involves a certain amount of corruption or a certain amount of, bribery which exchanges, right? And if Narendra Modi gets his job done by, let's say brushing aside a minority in his government, merely because he hasn't been convicted, or merely because there are no convictions or definite allegations which are made against him, does not remove the possibility of this happening. And the possibility in this case is so great because the world itself has seen this image which is projected out as Gujarat's Prime Minister, right? So this economic aspect of what they're talking about is also completely removed, Mr. Speaker, if you consider what I'm saying, right? And more importantly than this, right, they said that you contrast Narendra Modi with, let's say, a current Congress government. Let's look at Narendra Modi and let's look at Indira Gandhi. They control their cabinets, as is very obvious in Narendra Modi's current cabinet which is running, right? Because dissent isn't accepted. Guess who didn't do that? Indira didn't accept dissent either, right? If you look at Keshubhai Patel, right, the primary leader who's left the BJP right now, he's left because they have no dissent, dissent isn't allowed, and for all of the reasons, Mr. Speaker, so I'm very proud to report.
I thank the member of opposition for his speech. I now invite the government. Yeah.
Okay, Mr. Speaker. So in the course of the debate, we believe that there are only two things that we need to consider while deciding, right? The first thing, well, what are the reasons to have Modi as the Prime Minister of India? And two, what are the reasons to not have him? And whether the harms that these people pointed out are really bad enough to not have him as the Prime Minister. But the first, their closing operation came here and told us that we actually have to appear as a humanitarian state or a humanitarian nation to everyone else. They made absolutely no analysis on the fact on why, when we have Narendra Modi as the Prime Minister, we actually harm this image of it, right? Whether how having Narendra Modi as the Prime Minister will actually make India not appear as a humanitarian state. No thing on that. We have Shetty actually explained why nations do actually like to engage with Modi, but I'll bring it on in the later part of my talk. Now, on the first theme, right? What are the reasons that we have to have Modi as the Prime Minister, and why do we need him right now? Closing out told us that we didn't really talk about people. We completely ignored people as the main stakeholder. The first point that Shetty made was about the sentiment of people, right? What do people really care about? People look at what is the most enabling factor for them. What is the thing that will help me in the current situation? What is the way wherein I can benefit the most? They look for more money, jobs, and the fact at development, right? Something in which Modi has a proven track record. Over the past 10 years, he's completely changed the way Gujarat has been functioning. It is all self-evident from the fact of roads, electricity, certain laws being passed. It is completely evident that Modi has. The point being that since he has done it, you can easily say that he is much more likely to continue it when he goes and takes up the thing about the Prime Minister. He also gave you the example, right, that people about Egypt or Arab Spring, why was it that even after 40 years of the same policies, people revolted against the nations? The reason they did so was because the problem that he pointed out, right, economic problems, that was the single most important factor that led to people being overthrown. This tells us that the most important factor that people look while deciding the Prime Minister candidate is how you really go ahead and help them. And currently, Modi is the most proven candidate who will actually help us go and achieve that goal. Well, the second point which we told you, right, and which they did tell us about Modi himself, right, that he gave you the example, how you have various activists like Medha Patkar, Arvind Kejriwal, they go and file public interest litigations. They may be legitimate in while filing them on, and both of them may have differing points of view, but the point still remains. What kind of a leader do we want? Currently, India is erring on the side of being a bit safe, on the side of tribal. We currently need someone who will stand up for development of the nation as a whole. Modi is the only person who has actually stood up against the people. He gave you the example of the dam construction which was there a couple of years back. He stood on his ground and they did manage to get the bill passing by. On the point which opposition, right, they told us that the only reason, they gave us a few reasons why Modi should not be there. The first one being during international relations. They told us that a clean image is important. However, you need to consider the fact, right, that Gujarat currently has the highest amount of FDI in the nation. Why is that exactly? It proves to you that nations they do want to invest in Gujarat because they do believe that Modi is beneficial to them. They are willing to engage with Modi on this issue, and so we don't really believe that the issue of being the image is an important one. UK recently removed the ban which they had placed on the UK visa against Modi. We believe this is a move wherein they are finally beginning to accept that Modi is a credible candidate. When you understand the fact that government has the highest FDI, it tells you that people respond most importantly to money and the amount of prosperity that it can bring you. Considering that it is there in Gujarat, we believe that people, especially foreign companies, are willing to engage with Modi on a whole.
So, yeah. Why do you want a leader who has the guts to close his ears and not listen to Medha Patkar, rather than one who will actually consider and reconcile the conflicting
We dealt with that point twice, right? We told you that the current policies that were there, you always go on and end up backing off. We want someone, a leader, who will actually hold his ground and stand up for development as a whole, which opening government right really established why we actually need development right now. On the second point that why we shouldn't bring him up, they told about Modi plays some kind of politics, that he doesn't really care about the Muslim. The fact actually is that the Gujarati Muslims in Gujarat, they are among the most prosperous people in the state of Gujarat right now. They told us that he doesn't really care about the means, he only cares about the ends. They provided no substantiation as to how exactly he does that. They told us that he's willing to subvert laws to get there. We don't really understand how he's done that, because in case he did subvert laws or did some kind of changes or used unfair means to reach certain ends, there would certainly be some kind of corruption cases against him. There are currently no corruption cases. He has no corruption taint on it. If he does not have this kind of a case, how do they really explain and tell us that he has subverted laws to go and do this? Ultimately, so we do need to consider the fact, right? The reasons which we pointed out, what are the most important things for people being, we are the only team that talked about the sentiment of the people. The opening government told about how Modi is charismatic, but we told you how the symbolism that he carries, right? The symbolism that he projects, that of being a strong leader, is so important to India right now. We also told you that Modi, in and of himself, is the most, can deliver the goods. And the third thing which we also pointed out, right? That why not others? Congress essentially is an elitist party. They don't really come out. When Rahul Gandhi travels in local trains, why is it news? Because he doesn't really go and do that usually, right? It's because he's only doing it sometimes that it garners the kind of attention that he has. So considering all of that, right, and the harm that they pointed out, the simple one being international relations, which did not really make sense since companies have been investing in Gujarat, about Modi's politics, which again did not really make sense when they didn't provide any kind of substantiation and did not have absolutely any proof regarding whether he has been supporting laws or not. Considering all of these things, we believe that Modi himself is the only person currently and the best candidate for India to have for 2014. We are very proud to put it.
I thank the government for his speech. I now invite the opposition leaders. Yeah, hello.
Mr. Speaker, first of all, Neil forgot to say this. Symbiosis Law School is very proud to speak in the finals of the New Indian National Debate. Thank you. Okay. So, Mr. Speaker, summarizing the stance or summarizing what has actually happened in this debate, there have been two reasons as such provided for why Narendra Modi needs to be made a Prime Minister. The first one being thematized to the concept of he having a stellar track record as closing government has put it, and the second one being he being a really good leader of a cabinet of ministers, Mr. Speaker. So, Mr. Speaker, going down to as to how we're going to show you side opposition, specifically side closing opposition wins this debate, right? Coming down to the first point as to why he is a bad leader of a cabinet, right? We said that Narendra Modi in his character has shown through time and again that he is not a person who accepts dissent so easily. He is not a person who just does not accept dissent so easily. He is not a person who even listens to any other opinion other than what he deems to be fit. So now what is the problem with this, Mr. Speaker? We believe that the problem with this is that you form a quasi-dictatorial government which might or might not be always working in the favor and in the balance of what is the requirement at that moment for the country, but then he might be working in more for what he thought would be the need for our country, right? So the second thing that he says is that, second thing we would like to bring into this debate is Narendra Modi himself not giving voice to any kind of dissent in his government, right? See, everyone on side government had a problem with the Congress government because of the fact that it is a Gandhi patriarchy, right? See, now the main characteristic of the Gandhi patriarchy to begin with was because of the whole cabinet of ministers being a stronghold of the Gandhi family itself. Isn't that the same characteristic that Modi holds over the Gujarat cabinet, Mr. Speaker? Isn't that the same issue that we are going to dwell ourselves in, Mr. Speaker? So, Mr. Speaker, it is really important that we understand that we are actually going to lead ourselves into another situation where BJP will become a Modi patriarchy now. 100 years down the line, any person who's even going to take any kind of a call in the BJP might have to be a Modi only and no one else, right? Sit down. So the next thing we'll talk to you about is an example as to how Narendra Modi does not in any way allow dissent to come in any form, right? Amber brought out a very beautiful point about Medha Patkar and all these people, and when they were protesting against the Bhakra Nangal Dam and all these things, not Bhakra Nangal, okay, sorry. against a construction of a dam, right? Against the construction of a dam. So we say that when a prime minister especially is taking such a decision of sorts, there's a requirement of a dissent being there. Not just this, Mr. Speaker, we believe that Narendra Modi is going to even impact the BJP in itself because of the example that he cited, you of Keshubhai Patel, right? If he is not able to satisfy people who are on ideological similarities with him because of the fact that he was just going polar to what was actually the requirement, Mr. Speaker, we believe that he will not be able to hold up BJP in itself, but he will make it his family stronghold, okay? So this is going to be an extremely problematic thing. So now, what are the impacts of these moves? The first one being the check and balance system that exists in a cabinet of ministers is completely being taken away because of the Modi stronghold that we'll be talking to you about. Now, this might lead to two issues, right? There might be an issue where everyone might just be a Modi loyalist in the cabinet. What will happen in that case is that Modi cabinet, quasi-dictatorship. In case everyone does not really agree with Modi, what is going to happen? Disjointed and disharmonized governance in our country, Mr. Speaker. We face that really, really big risk, okay? For example, this was actually very evidently seen in the Yadiyurappa government in Karnataka, right? When Yadiyurappa himself decided that he needs to be more important than his cabinet of ministers, portrayed his own needs and things over and above what BJP itself stood for, we believe that that was extremely problematic.
When we come and say India needs development, not just the people, India as a state, as an entire unity of a state needs development, can you give us one argument why when you go outside and ask a cycle rickshaw driver whether he wants money or whether he wants some cultural, Vedic, whatever that he wants? Which one will he choose and why?
Sit down. Why, Mr. Speaker, the concept of economic development that Modi has a stellar track record in will not hold us any kind of a benefit in the future, right? Why is China, why has Apple withdrawn a lot of manufacturing processes from China? It is because of the fact that China might be able to be a stellar place for economic track records, but they have not been able to in any way provide for human rights, and this foreign direct investment that they are talking about will stop flowing into our country because of the fact that, see, now Gujarat is not in the limelight of the world, okay? But when India, as Narendra Modi, comes into the limelight of the world, what is going to happen is that people are going to concentrate on the wrongdoings of him, and they're not going to let the companies of their nations go ahead and invest in India because they know that India is not something that they, ideologically stand on the same plane with. And they will not at all consider it to be a safe location, Mr. Speaker, the most important factor, because of the fact that they will know that there will be not much cultural identity, not much human development index that Narendra Modi is in any way, advancing for their national government, right? So they're going to understand that India is going to just become a place for great cheap labor. It's just going to become a place for great, places with nice forests which can be destroyed and people can set up factories and everything. But they're going to understand that they will not be able to invest even if they want to, even if the opportunity might exist, because the outrage that the world community will create of investing in a state which does not really cater to too much of a human development index, right? And China is just an example which keeps re-solidifying this fact. And the next thing we talk to you about is how Narendra Modi is okay, yeah. Now, Mr. Speaker, BJP in itself, right, has a lot of external influences that exist. So when Narendra Modi is a person who's going to be a single party head, who's not going to be able to satisfy all these opinions, the BJP itself is going to crumble. Not just this, Mr. Speaker, we told you that since he won't be able to in any way preserve the quality of India, that, the benchmark or the trademark that India has of being a good place for investment, he will not be able to retain that mark anymore. For all these reasons, we are very proud to oppose.